So welcome friends, how are you? So what if Naruto's past caught up to Denki Kaminari? Movie. We find a group of 18 people sitting around a common room eating a breakfast of bacon, eggs, biscuits, and gravy. Hey Kachin, where's Kirishima at? Asks a male with dark green poofy hair and green eyes. Shut the hell up and eat Deku, shitty hair went to wake up Sparky. Yells another male with ash blonde hair and red eyes. Eyes, problem I can't find Kaminari. Yells another male of with spiky red hair and red eyes running down the stairs. The roof. Says a girl with short dark blue hair and her eyes are shut and there's an earphone jack hanging from both her earlobes. What do you mean by the roof, Jiro? Asks Deku. Well, Izuku, anytime Kaminari is upset, nervous or angry, he goes up there to work things out. Did you think he's perpetually happy-go-lucky? She says, taking a sip of milk. How would you know that, Kyoka? The kid with red hair asks, with a smile. Nothing like what you're thinking, Kirishima. Last month before the provisional license exam I went up to the roof to play my guitar and he was up there watching clouds. I asked him why he was up there. He said he was nervous about the exam. She says. Roof of Heights Alliance. We find a male, he has orangish yellow spiky hair with a streak of black in the shape of a lightning bolt and similarly orangish yellow eyes and he's wearing UA's school uniform. He seems a bit frightened and is currently staring off into the sky when he hears the door to the roof open. Yo bro Minari, what are you doing up here? Kirishima asks, not being able to see the frown on his face shoot up into a smile as he turns around and faces him. No problems Kirishima, just woke up early and couldn't fall back to sleep. It's just with all that's happened the last couple months, with All Might, then the exam, and Izuku and the Yakuza and Little Eerie. Go on, I'll see you in class. Kaminari says. Okay then, see you in class buddy. Kirishima says as he goes back in. I hate hiding from them. Kaminari thinks as his smile falls back into a frown and electricity seems to arc off him and he disappears from the roof and appears outside 1A's dorm and walks away, not noticing the floating uniform near the dorm. Counselor's office. Inui-sensei, it's Kaminari, I need to talk. He says, knocking on the door. The door opens and we see a big man with the head of a dog. What's the problem Kaminari? Inui asks. Leaf. Kaminari says and Inui's eyes widen. Oh, it's been a while since they invaded your thoughts, come on in. Inui says as they both go into Inui's office. So what has made you suddenly start thinking of them, Naruto? He asks. A nightmare. Denki says starting to shake. It must have been a bad nightmare to frighten you to the point of shaking, what happened? Inui asks. I don't know why I'm so frightened really, I know that my classmates can handle themselves. Kaminari says. So it involves your classmates? Inui asks. Yeah, they attacked and kidnapped one of my classmates, I couldn't see which one though, or who from my past was in the dream. Kaminari says sadly. It's alright, it was just a dream. Inui says patting his shoulder. I know, but it just felt so real. Kaminari says. That's because of how emotionally invested to everything in that dream you are. Inui says. But that's only one of 3 problems. The second being, I hate my past, but no matter how hard I try it always weasels its way back into my mind. Kaminari says. Sadly I can't help you with that, because to do that you need to face your past at its source, which under your circumstances you can't very well do, can you? Inui says. I know, and the third is I'm tired of all of this, lying to all of them, but I'm scared of how they'll react. Kaminari says sadly. It makes sense that you'd be scared of revealing the real you to them after everything you've been through, Naruto. They hear and look to the side and see what seems to be a white mouse, dog, or maybe a bear wearing a suit and has a rather large scar over his right eye. Principal Nezu, a pleasure to see you. Kaminari says, his frown turning into a real smile. You as well, Naruto, now shouldn't you really get to class? Nezu asks. I guess you're right. Kaminari says, leaving. I know life is never fair, but what he's gone through, it's absolutely disgusting. Inui says, angry. I know, hound dog, I know. Nezu says. Is both your similar pasts the reason you're quite fond of him? Inui asks. Him and I were both treated less than humanely for things out of our control, so yes, but I don't let it get in the way. Nezu says. Later at lunch. Hey Kaminari, anything new with you? Asks a very energetic girl with pink hair and skin and yellow eyes with black sclera and a pair of small horn growing out of her head. No, why Mina? Kaminari asks confused. Well, Toru swears up and down, she saw you seemingly teleport right in front of the dorm this morning, quite a bit before Kirishima came back down. Mina says practically with a Cheshire grin. What? Kaminari thinks without his expression changing at all. Someone probably used some sort of illusion quirk on her, my quirk's still as worthless as ever. He says, hoping they buy it. Maybe an upperclassman was playing a joke on me. says the floating clothes called Toru Hagakure. Thank Kami. Kaminari thinks, setting his tray with a couple burgers on it down. Had to be, at that point I was still on the roof, trying to sort through everything that's happened the last couple of months. He says. So anything new with you two? He asks. Nope. Mina says, pouting. You're so lucky, Toru. She says loudly. Why, what's going on with you, Hagakure? Kaminari asks. Well, Ijiro kind of asked me to go on a date with him and I said yes, we're gonna go Sunday. She says. Well, good for you, Hagakure. Mina, why don't you ask Kirishima already, the two of us know you like him. Kaminari says. Why don't you take your own advice and ask Kyoka? Mina says once again with a Cheshire grin and is pleased to see a light blush on his face. Why, it's not like she'd go for someone like me. No matter how much I'd hope. Kaminari thinks. What do you mean by that, Kaminari? Hagakure asks. Eyes look at everything about me, I'm still at the bottom of the class while she's in the top 10 and the only improvement on my quirk I've made is thanks to a support item, I'm completely and utterly hopeless. Kaminari says. Another lunch group. Something wrong, Kyoka? Asks a girl with long black hair and a spiky ponytail and black eyes and she's quite well endowed, seeing Kyoka's slightly wide eyes. No, Momo, but I may have heard a conversation I wasn't meant to hear. Kyoka says. What did you hear, Kyoka? Asks a girl with long orange hair up in a ponytail and teal eyes. I don't think it'd be appropriate to say, Itsuka. She says. You don't normally care about that type of thing, you hear who some of our classmates have a crush on or something. Asks a male with short red and white hair, white on the right and red on the left, he has heterochromia with his right iris being gray and his left being turquoise and a large scar around his left eye. I know you joking, Todoroki, but you're right. Kyoka says, surprising them. Why even bring this up then? Asks another male, he has long messy gray hair and black eyes that are lined with a very thick jagged tan-colored substance. Tetsu's kind of right. Kendo says sheepishly just before the bell rings. Later Heights Alliance. We see all the girls of one around a table in the girls' personal common room. So how was everyone's day? Asks a girl with brown hair and a bob style and brown eyes and a seemingly perpetual blush. As much as I'd like to talk about school, I have a better idea, Chaco. Mina says. What would that be, Mina, ribbit? Asks a girl with long dark green hair tied in a bow and large round black eyes. Well, how about the topic of crushes, Sue? Mina says. Mina, why do you always want to talk about this topic? Momo asks, a bit annoyed. No, this time it'll be in reverse, who we think the boys have a crush on. Mina says. That does sound interesting, but can you and me talk privately for a minute? Kyoka asks. Sure. Mina says, following Kyoka into the hallway. So what did you want to talk about? She asks. You know, me and my group were 2 tables away from you at lunch. Kyoka asks. Yeah, so? Mina says. Well, I heard your entire conversation, were you just teasing Kaminari? Kyoka asks. Of course not, I love teasing people, but no matter how much he tries to hide it, he likes you in some capacity. How do you feel about this? Mina asks. How am I supposed to know? I never thought about any of this before, the only thing I can say is I'm fond of him, he's definitely better than Mineta. Kyoka says. Ahaha, Kyoka, everyone's better than Mineta. Mina says, laughing. Now let's go back. She says, as they walk back into the common room. So who are we starting with? Asks Toru. How about Bakugo? Mina says. Really, I doubt Nteen has a crush on anyone, but if he does I feel extremely sorry for them. Kyoka says. What about you, Ichako? He seems to at least hate you a lot less than anyone else, hell he even danced with you on Island. Mina yells. Well, Mina's not exactly wrong, ribbit. Sayu says. I have to concur. Momo says. Sorry, Ichako, but I have to agree with him. Toru says. But I highly doubt that. Ichako yells, covering her blushing face as she starts to float up. Okay then, how about Midoriya? Mina says and almost grins when she sees Sayu fidget slightly. Well, he and Sayu seem to be spending a lot of time together. Toru says. Eyes. Ichako says but is ignored. It's just sparring, ribbit. Sayu says but is fighting a blush. Eyes. Ichako says but is once again ignored. On Tsu, out of all our class you're the only one who he calls by first name. Mina says. But if you recall, Mina, she told him to call her Tsu. Momo says, no one noticing. Sayu sigh in relief. Eyes. Ichako yells. Yes, Chaco. Mina says. Look at this. Ichako say, pointing out the window. When they gather at the window, they see Kaminari leaning against a tree staring at the moon, starting to play a weird-looking guitar. It has the strings on it, but there were also several speakers on it. They open the window and hear an actual song, all but the guitar and lyrics coming from the speakers. That's a rocking guitar. Kyoka says as Kaminari starts singing. If today was your last day, Nickelback. My best friend gave me the best advice, said each day's a gift and not a given right, leave no stone unturned, leave your fears behind and try to take the path less traveled by, that first step you take is the longest stride. If today was your last day and tomorrow was too late, could you say goodbye to yesterday, would you live each moment like your last, leave old pictures in the past, donate every dime you have if today was your last day, if today was your last day. Against the grain should be a way of life, what's worth the prize is always worth the fight, every second counts cause there's no second try, so live like you'll never live it twice, don't take the free ride in your own life. If today was your last day and tomorrow was too late, could you say goodbye to yesterday, would you live each moment like your last, leave old pictures in the past, donate every dime you have, would you call old friends you never see, reminisce old memories, would you forgive your enemies, would you find that one you're dreaming of, swear up and down to God above that you finally fall in love, if today was your last day. If today was your last day, would you make your mark by mending a broken heart, you know it's never too late to shoot for the stars regardless of who you are, so do whatever it takes, cause you can't rewind a moment in this life, let nothing stand in your way, cause the hands of time are never on your side. If today was your last day and tomorrow was too late, could you say goodbye to yesterday, would you live each moment like your last, leave old pictures in the past, donate every dime you have, would you call old friends you never see, reminisce old memories, would you forgive your enemies, would you find that one you're dreaming of, swear up and down to God above that you finally fall in love, if today was your last day. They close the window before they get caught, but Jiro manages to hear him say how Hatsune has outdone herself. Damn, I can't believe I'm about to say this, but he's as good if not a little better than me. Kyoka says. I knew he liked music, but I can't believe Hagakure and I didn't already know about this. Looks like you two have something in common after all, Kyoka. Mina says, smiling. Why's that matter? Echako asks, confused. Mina thinks it matters because apparently Kaminari has a crush on myself. Kyoka says. So that's what you heard at lunch. Momo says. I'm going to bed. Kyoka says, heading to her room. But it's only 9. Mina says. Well, you know what they say, the early bird catches the worm. Kyoka says, shutting her door. I agree, plus tomorrow's Friday, we still have the weekend, good night. Sayu says, also leaving to her room. Next afternoon. We see Kaminari and 2 adults walking towards Heights Alliance. You know, as always sensei, with the amount of detention I get from you to cover for my real training, I'm surprised my classmates haven't asked me how I've not been expelled. Kaminari says to one of the adults. Said adult has long messy black hair and tired looking eyes. Well, young Kaminari, it simply can't be helped since you're not yet ready to reveal the truth to them, but for some reason I have a bad feeling. Says the other adult, who has blonde droopy hair, blue eyes with black sclera, and he slightly looks like a skeleton. That's not a good thing, Yagi-sensei. Kaminari says, and then sees Izuku pacing outside the dorm. Is there a problem, Midoriya? Aizawa asks. Why, yes, a big one, Kyoka has been kidnapped. Izuku says. What? All 3 of them yell. Hagakure and Ishido were also attacked, they just woke up. Says a male walking out of the dorm, he has short-combed dark blue hair and black angry eyes. Where are they, Iida? Asks Aizawa. The main common room, sir. Iida says. Inside. Aizawa-sensei, All Might-sensei, you're back. Yells Ichako. Young Ishido and young Hagakure, what happened? All Might asks. I don't know, Hagakure, and I felt something hit us and knock us unconscious. But before I was fully unconscious I heard Kyoka scream, someone say if you want your friend back, give us ours, and then this was dropped by my head. Mina say, crying and holding up some type of headband with a metal plate that has some type of symbol etched in it, leaf symbol. Kaminari, you alright? Asks a male with short blonde hair and black eyes and a large tail sticking out of the back of his shirt. Consequently making everyone look at him, and they see him staring at the weird headband with wide afraid eyes, and the black streak in his hair is no longer black, but a bright yellow. They all see him back up against the wall, holding his chest, starting to breathe heavily, and electricity starts arcing off in him sporadically before he passes out. Well, shit. Aizawa says. What just happened? Ichako asks, very confused. Well, it seems young Kaminari has had a panic attack. All Might says. But why, what's the problem with this? Mina asks, indicating the headband. It's not the headband, Ishido, it's who it represents. Ejiro, Kirishima take Kaminari back to his room. Aizawa says. Aizawa, do you really think it's them? All Might asks. I do, as much as we don't want it to be, there's only one group who'd make him have a panic attack like that. Now go wait in his room for him to wake up and try to convince him not to do anything stupid. Aizawa say. Right. All Might says, going upstairs. Aizawa-sensei, what's going on, what's with Kaminari? Sayu asks. I'm respecting Kaminari by not saying anything. If you want the details you need to ask him, but I will give the basic details. The people we're dealing with are a group who raised Kaminari before his parents that some of you have met. Under them his life was utter hell, all because of a power he had, and no, it wasn't his quirk. Aizawa says, after a couple hours some of them freak out when the power goes out, and after a couple minutes they see All Might walk down the stairs and his hair's all frizzy, and he's slightly twitchy. I'm guessing he's awake and not taking it very well. He asks chuckling. Aizawa, the entire city is out of power, how well do you think he's taking it? All Might asks angry. Wait, All Might, what do you mean the entire city is out of power, and what does this have to do with Kaminari? Izuku asks. Well, I can't exactly say much without young Kaminari's consent, but I can say this: his quirk is a lot more powerful than any of you think it is, but it is also severely swayed by his emotions. This blackout is because of his emotional state so far. All Might says. But the question is why he's reacting so harshly to this situation. Aizawa asks. Oh, that's easy, well the two of you know more of him than we do, there's something me and Toru know that you don't. Mina chirps. What is that, young Ishido? All Might asks. What do you think? Kaminari loves Kyoka, but he's too afraid of rejection to say anything. Mina says, grinning, as the power comes back on but music starts playing over the speakers, a song Mina recognizes as Total Eclipse of the Heart thanks to Kaminari's love of music. It must be a strong love if this is happening. All Might says. What do you mean? Ichako asks. During times of high emotion, Kaminari's quirk can manipulate speakers and they'll play music matching it. All Might says. After an hour a new song plays. I don't think I've ever heard this song before, but I can tell he's pissed. He says. This song is called Bodies, if it's playing because of his emotional state, then he's beyond pissed. Mina says, worried. After a couple minutes they hear the sound of electricity crackling coming from the stairwell, and they see Kaminari walking down, but they can't see his eyes at the moment, but they can see the streak in his hair that's normally black is a pulsing red. He walks by and grabs the weird headband and starts heading for the door. Kaminari, what are you doing? Aizawa asks but is completely ignored. Sai, Midoriya, Todoroki, and Mina, you three follow him and try to calm him down and get him to come back. He orders. And if we can't calm him down? Todoroki asks. If you can't calm him down and get him to come back, just make sure he doesn't kill anyone. Aizawa orders, surprising everyone but All Might. He wouldn't actually do that, would he? Midoriya asks, stunned at the prospect of Kaminari killing anyone. Midoriya, Kaminari's past is a very dark subject, killing the people that have kidnapped Kyoka is a very pleasing idea in his current state of mind. Also, you have my permission to use your quirks if a fight happens. Aizawa says and they nod, they then walk out the door. Why those three, Aizawa? All Might asks. Well, Midoriya and Todoroki are the most likely to be able to stop him, and Ishido is most likely to be able to calm him down outside of Kyoka most likely. Aizawa replies. That makes sense. All Might replies. But DISM. We see the three of them catch up to Kaminari in time to see him glide his crackling finger across the metal plate, leaving a slash mark through the plate. Kaminari, are you? Izuku goes to say. Midoriya, please just leave me to my thoughts, you aren't talking me out of this. Kaminari says. Why would we stop you? Kyoka's our friend also, we want to save her as much as you do. Todoroki says, surprising the three of them. Sai, you can come along but leave the talking to me. Hound Dog Sensei told me the only way for me to ever get over my past is to face it, I now have that chance. Kaminari says, staring at the headband that now has a slash through it when he hears Mina sigh. Yes, Mina. He says. Oh, it's nothing, Kaminari. She says with a fake laugh. Mina, it's alright, I trust you, and I probably would have told you about my past sooner or later, just so I could have someone in our class I could act normal around. Same for you, Midoriya, and eventually you, Todoroki. Kaminari says. Mina, I get why the two of us. Todoroki asks. Because the two of you can understand aspects of what I went through. Midoriya, you could understand me being hated for something I had no control over. And Todoroki, you can understand that the hate I have for these people stems from them only thinking of me as a weapon. Kaminari says. Okay, Kaminari, you don't actually plan on killing anyone, do you? Midoriya asks. Honestly, Midoriya, it depends. Kaminari says. On what exactly? Mina asks. If they've done anything to Kyoka and how much they piss me off. He replies, pocketing the headband. Kaminari, as always, Sensei said you panicked because of who that headband represents. Mina say. He's mostly right, but it also represents my previous loyalties. Kaminari says. What do you mean? Todoroki asks. Like I said, I was hated for something I had no control over. That headband was mine, it meant I was one of their warriors. Back then I thought that if I protected them I could gain their trust. Kaminari says. Wouldn't you have been pretty young? Midoriya asks. Yeah, I was 12. Kaminari says, surprising them. By the way, do you even know where you're going? Todoroki asks. You three can't feel it of course, but the people behind this are just letting a source of power flow out that I can easily sense. Kaminari responds. Now be quiet and let me think, so I don't just outright kill them for kidnapping her in the first place. He says and they nod. Some warehouse close to the docks. They're in here, remember leave the talking to me. Kaminari says and they nod as he pushes the doors open. They see Kyoka sitting in a chair unconscious in the middle of the room. Kaminari looks around the room and stares at the ceiling for a second and they see his face contort into rage. Okay pervert, get your ass out here so I can beat your fucking face in. He roars, startling everyone, even Kyoka is startled awake. Damn it Kaminari, what have I told you about screaming around me? Kyoka says a bit mad but turns pale when she remembers what happened. Kyoka, you might want to get over here. Mina says, noticing 4 people a couple feet behind Kyoka. Of all the fucking people they could have sent, it had to of course be the 4 of you. Kaminari hisses out. It's nice to see you to Naruto. Says a rather laid-back voice. Don't call me that Kakashi, I haven't gone by that name since I met my adopted parents. He hisses. They see that the guy Kaminari calls Kakashi has grey gravity-defying spiky hair with a weird headband on his head and down over his left eye, while the right is black. Then what do we call you kid? Says a somewhat cheerful voice. Jiraiya. I go by Denki Kaminari. He says. And they can see the guy called Jiraiya is rather old, has long spiky white hair tied in a ponytail and black eyes. So what are you here for, considering what you did to get me here? I'm guessing this isn't a social visit. Kaminari says. We're here to take you home. Jiraiya says. I guess you've gone senile pervy sage. If you don't remember, I was banished for what I did to Duck Ass over there to return him. By the way, I am home. Kaminari says. And they look at the guy he motioned to, and like he said the guy has black hair reminiscent of a duck's ass and black eyes and a seemingly permanent scowl. Then Denki, Lady Tsunade got the banishment rescinded. Says the only girl in the group. Well Granny Tsunade was already too late when I got banished in the first place, Sakura. Kaminari growls out. You have no choice in the matter loser, you're coming with us whether you like it or not. Says Duck Ass, but they're all surprised by Kaminari chuckling. You know Sasuke, I doubt Tsunade would be happy if you bring me to her dead. Cause taking me back to the elemental nations is a death sentence for me. Kaminari says. What do you mean loser? Sasuke asks curious. I mean this. Kaminari says taking his shirt off and Jiraiya's eyes widen when he sees an intricate seal on his chest where his heart is. I bet you know what seal this is Jiraiya. He says grinning like a cat who caught the mouse. Kid, why the hell do you have a Deadman Switch seal on you and what's it tied to? Jiraiya asks. Oh this little thing I got it when the barrier around the elemental nations pulled the Kyuubi out of me and the seal is tied to the very same barrier. Kaminari says confusing his friends and scaring the 4 from his past. Kid please tell me you're joking. Jiraiya pleads. Well I still love a good joke every so often, none of what I just said is a joke. If I return to the elemental nations this seal will kill me. Kaminari say joyfully. Naruto, why do you sound happy about that? You can never return to those who care about you. Sakura says. I am with the people who care about me, Sakura. There are only 6 people from the elemental nations I'd actually feel bad telling this to, and they actually did care for me, everyone else is just pity or guilt. Kaminari yells. Now onto the actual reason I'm here. He says. What do you mean? Kakashi asks. I came for Kyoka, wanting to know why you were here was just curiosity. Kaminari says quietly as white electricity starts arsing around him. Now you have 2 options, maybe a third. He says. What do you mean maybe a third? Jiraiya asks. Well the original 2 were you leave and never come back or I turn this entire district into a smoldering crater. He says surprising everyone. But the third is, you leave, but if they really want to see me agree to this, give me some type of warning, so I know you're going to pop in. Jiraiya, am I still on the scroll? He asks and is amused when he sees Jiraiya's eyes widen and facepalm. Of course you are. Jiraiya says. See this all could have been avoided if you sent me a message. Kaminari says. Now leave, Sakura, could you tell someone something for me? He asks. Sure, who and what? She asks as he walks up to her. Tell Hinata I'm sorry it took so long for me to realize, but I love someone else. Kaminari whispers forgetting that Kyoka could hear him. You were beyond pissed an hour ago, but now you're saying you're alright with them showing up? Todoroki asks confused. Remember what I said earlier, Hound Dog said the only way I'll get over my past is to face it. Kaminari says. Come on, let's get back to Heights Alliance. Midoriya says and the rest nod. Heights Alliance. They walk in and see Nezu sitting on the couch. Ah, you're back, you four, go to bed, Kaminari and I have some things to discuss. And before you ask, no, he's not in trouble. After all, this is something he needed to do. Nezu says, as all but Kaminari head to their rooms. So how'd it go? He asks. Turns out Granny Tsunade got the banishment rescinded. Kaminari says. How'd they take the seal, and you no longer being a Jinchuriki? Nezu asks. Surprisingly, they said absolutely nothing about the Kyuubi and only paid attention to the Deadman Switch seal. Kaminari says, leaning back in the chair and crossing his arms, not noticing the rest of the class at the stairwell. So now that you've cooled off, would you say you underestimated that some of them did care about you? Nezu asks. Yeah, I guess I did. Kaminari says. So what happened after you got Ms. Jiro? Nezu asks. Well, I was ready to get the four of them back and turn that entire district of warehouses into a smoldering crater. But then I thought that's not what a hero would do. Well, maybe Endeavor would, but I'm not like him. So I talked, and as long as they give me a warning they can come see me, since there really are some I'd like to see again. Kaminari says. So you're fully taking Hound Dog's words to heart, that's good. You're too young to hold on to hatred. Nezu says, but flinches when he sees Kaminari staring at him. Nezu, hatred is the only emotion I've ever known until the day I met the Kaminaris. Kaminari says. So what are going to do now? Nezu asks. It's obvious, isn't it? I need to think about everything, so I'm going for a walk, hell I might sing. Kaminari says, getting up and heading for the door. Okay class, you can stop hiding. Nezu says after the door shuts and the rest of the class walks out of the stairwell aside from Bakugo. Shouldn't he be going to bed? Iida asks. After everything that has happened today, sleep is the last thing that he'll accept. Jiro, Ejiro, Kirishima and Hagakure make sure he doesn't stay out all night, the rest of you get to bed. Nezu orders as he and the four he called walk out the door. Walk that way and you'll no doubt find him. He says, pointing into the small forest behind Heights Alliance. Both Kirishima and Ejiro are surprised at how good he is. Let me talk to him for a minute. Hagakure whispers and then starts clapping, surprising Kaminari. Hagakure? Kaminari says. Are you alright after everything that happened today? She asks. Compared to earlier, yeah. He replies. So, you reacted so badly because it was Kyoka. She says and giggles when he blushes. You wouldn't be wrong. He says, not realizing Kyoka is hiding behind the bushes Hagakure came out of, who is thanking whatever deity that no one can see the blush on her face. You really do love her, why haven't you said anything to her? She asks. When I'm scared, the me you all know is nothing but a fabrication, no one would like the real me. 2, I don't know what to say. He says. How about something you'll both understand? She says. Like what? He asks quizzically. Nari, this is the second time I've seen you singing, and it's amazing. She says. What is she doing? Kyoka thinks. So you think I should sing to her? He asks. Of course you should. Hagakure squeals. There's only one song I can think of that represents my feelings perfectly. Kaminari says. Can I hear it? Hagakure asks. I trust you as much as I do Mina, yes. He says. We find everyone except Kaminari in the main common room downstairs, eating breakfast. Has anyone seen Kaminari since last night? Kirishima asks. It was around midnight when he felt emotionally stable enough to come back to the dorms. So leave him be for now, we all have questions, but let's wait until he's ready to talk about it. Hagakure says. Well said, young Hagakure. Says All Might. What are you doing here, All Might? Mina asks. Outside of seeing how my students are doing, I came to check on Kaminari. All Might replies, they all hear the elevator ping. They quiet down when they hear the elevator ding, the doors open and they see Kaminari walk out and head to the fridge. He grabs a breakfast burrito from the freezer and then goes to heat it up in the microwave when he sees everyone staring at him. We'll all talk tonight. Kaminari says, heating up the burrito. You don't have to do it so quick, Kaminari. Izuku says. I know, but I want to, there's no reason to hide from any of you anymore. Kaminari says as the microwave dings and he grabs the burrito. He then heads outside. Where are you going? All Might asks. The talk Hagakure and I had helped a lot, but I need some time to myself and gather my thoughts. Kaminari says as he walks out, no one noticing a certain punk rocker slip out the back. Forest. We find Kaminari hitting a tree, flat out letting out all his frustration. It's been a while. Kaminari thinks as he pours chakra into his leg and then surrounds it with electricity and proceeds to kick the tree and shocking the person who he knows is watching him, his leg goes through the tree like a hot knife through butter. And to go through the rest of his frustration he keeps kicking more trees. He goes at this for several hours to the point the moon's coming up a little, but it's still daylight and he's extremely exhausted. He then sits at the base of a tree to catch his breath. Quite persistent, aren't we? he says chuckling. You've stood there watching me for nearly 6 hours, Kyoka. He says. You knew I was here the entire time, didn't you, even though I made no sound? Kyoka says. I may not have your hearing, but I do have an extremely high sense of smell. And not that you smell or anything. Kaminari says, slightly panicking and blushing in embarrassment, but calms down when he hears her chuckling. You know, this is the first time I've seen you embarrassed. You weren't even embarrassed when you lost to that girl from class 1B. She says. Why would I be embarrassed? I let her win. He says. Why? She asks confused. Kyoka, in all my experience, attention brings nothing but trouble. Look at what happened when Bakugo got the attention of the league, it affected more than just him. All Might's power is gone. Midoriya has the attention of a psychotic stalker who just so happens has a fetish for stabbing the people she loves. That's going to make his and Asui's relationship needlessly complicated. He says, but then notices her eyes widen. Asui seriously hasn't told any of you, given Midoriya hasn't said anything, but that's expected. Asui, on the other hand, I expected her to tell at least one of you, it probably has something to do with Ochako. He says. Why do you say that, and how do you know they're in a relationship if neither of them has said anything? She asks, and he points at his nose. Remember, high sense of smell. Too much of their smells are on both of them for just sparring. But needless to say, they're hiding it, so we keep the fact that we know between the two of us. And everyone in class, aside from Midoriya, knows Uraraka likes him. Kaminari says, and Kyoka nods. You're being chill about this. I expected you to be a little angry with me watching you. She says. More confused than anything that you'd go out of the way to find me since I said I'd tell everyone tonight. He says, but kind of shuts down when he sees pink dust her cheeks. You probably know that Hagakure wasn't alone last night. She says, trying not to blush, remembering the song he sees representing his feelings for her. Yeah, there was Ajiro, Kirishima, and you. He says and proceeds to pass out with a fully red face. Maybe I shouldn't have brought that up. She thinks. After a minute she wakes him up using one of her jacks. I'm up. He says, shooting up, and sees Kyoka roll her eyes. I'm sorry. He says, not looking her in the eyes. Why are you apologizing? She asks. If I had been paying attention and realized you were there, I wouldn't have sang that. I know you don't like corny things like that. He says, and she turns around to hide the creeping blush. Well yeah, but corny or not, it was still sweet. She says. Now you've been venting for 6 hours and neither of us have eaten anything in that time. Do you want to get something to eat? She asks. Sure. He says. Musatafu shopping mall restaurant section. We see Kaminari and Kyoka sitting at a restaurant waiting for food. I know you said you'll tell everyone about your past. But can I ask you a couple of things? Kyoka asks. Of course. I do owe you this, you did get dragged into my problems. Kaminari says. Kaminari, you don't owe me shit, it's not like you knew that was going to happen. She says. No, but something in me did know. He says. Does this have something to do with you being on the roof Thursday? She asks. I woke up from a nightmare where some people from my past kidnapped one of you. As you know, it came to pass. Anyway, what were you wanting to ask me? He asks. Alright, who's Hinata? She asks and then sees him smile, and this smile is different from any smile she's ever seen from him. For a long time after I left my past behind, there was only one person I thought still cared about me, and I'm probably going to end up breaking her heart when those guys get back. He says. What do you mean? She asks. Well, when she was around me she always acted different than around anyone else. She would constantly blush and I was fucking dense back then, so I thought vomiting was wrong, so I would put my hand on her forehead and she'd pass out. It wasn't until the internships that I figured out what was going on with her. He says. I'm guessing that's when you realized your feelings about me. She says, fighting the pink, trying to dust her cheeks. Why yeah. He says, blushing. But that's also the moment when I truly started to hate hiding from all of you. He says. They pause when their food is placed in front of them and they both thank the waiter. So did you have any other friends? She asks. Later at Heights Alliance. We see all of Class 1A, besides Kyoka and Kaminari, waiting in the common room. Where's Kaminari at? Izuku asks. Do any of you realize someone else is missing? Mina asks. Before anyone can reply, they hear Kaminari's voice outside the door. Then there's Gaara, he was the first true friend I made, he was a Jinchuriki like I was, he understood what I went through. Kaminari says. They then see the door open and they see Kaminari and Kyoka walk in. Did something happen between the two of you or something? Kirishima says teasingly. No, I just ran across him venting and then checked on him later and he'd been venting for 6 hours straight, so I made sure he got something to eat. Kyoka says plainly. Is that all? How do we know it wasn't a date? Mina asks teasingly. It wasn't a date. Kaminari and Kyoka yell at the same time, then look at each other, blush and look the other way, making several people chuckle. There's nothing wrong if you were. Iida says, then he finds one of Kyoka's jacks pointed at his face. Nothing happened. She grinds out, then they sit on the couch, but with a space in between them. While everyone looks at Kaminari patiently and seriously, even Bakugo surprisingly. Do any of you know the area of the Pacific known as the Dragon's Triangle? Kaminari asks, as expected Momo knows. It's our counterpart to the United States Bermuda Triangle. Momo says. Yes, and similar to the Bermuda Triangle, people who go there are never seen again. Here's the part only I could tell you. There's an entire continent called the Elemental Nations hidden in the Dragon's Triangle. Kaminari says. No one notices. Izuku's eyes widen in realization. What do you mean by only you could tell us that? Kirishima asks. Kirishima, he's saying that he's from a part of the world no one else knows about. Izuku says. The teachers and all might know about it. Kaminari says. Anyway, as you can expect, the Elemental Nation is very different. First and foremost, the people there don't have quirks, or more plainly I should say we aren't supposed to have quirks. He says. Then how do you have a quirk? Kirishima asks. How do I say this? There's a barrier around the Elemental Nations that hides it. To leave I went through it, but when I left, the barrier took something out and somehow replaced it with my quirk. Kaminari says. What was replaced with your quirk, Ribbit? Asui asks. To explain that facet alone, there's a lot I'll have to explain. Kaminari says. Well, we don't have anywhere to be. Todoroki says. Okay, I'll start with the most important thing of the Elemental Nations, chakra. Kaminari says. You mean that dumb shit about inner energy? Bakugo says. Yes and no. Out here the concept around chakra is just that, a concept. Chakras are the various focal points in the subtle body used in a variety of ancient meditation practices, collectively denominated as Tantra or the esoteric or inner traditions of Hinduism. In the Elemental Nations, however, chakra is a real thing, it's the life force of every living thing in the Elemental Nations. While out here the big thing is being a hero, in the Elemental Nations it's being a shinobi, otherwise known as a ninja. Chakra is critical for all aspects of being a ninja, be it ninjutsu, fuinjutsu, jinjutsu, and even taijutsu in some aspects. Ninjutsu is the art of molding chakra into the very elements themselves through hand signs. Kaminari says, as they follow him outside, where he proceeds to go through Hansen's fire style. Fireball jutsu. Kaminari yells before spitting a giant fireball into the sky, making their eyes widen. Now fuinjutsu is the art of sealing jutsu, which can be used for things as simple as storage of items to as complex as the imprisonment of a living creature. He says, as in a puff of smoke, they see his unique guitar appear in his hand. What about that, seal on your chest? Mina asks. What are you talking about, Mina? Momo asks. I have a seal that prevents me from ever going back to the Elemental Nations. He says, as he pulls off his shirt, and everyone gasps at all the scars, hell even Bakugo winces, they then see the kanji for death on his chest. This seal is called a Deadman Switch seal. If I cross the barrier around the Elemental Nations, this seal will instantly kill me. He says. Do you miss the Elemental Nations, Kaminari? Momo asks. Hell no, in the last 3 years, I've been happier than I ever was in the Elemental Nations. He says. Kaminari, can you continue the explanation? Hagakure asks. Yeah, now what's next, right? Jinjutsu is the art of molding chakra into illusions that can affect all 5 senses. When I was in the Elemental Nations, I couldn't use Jinjutsu to save my life, but I've been doing some studying. Now Taijutsu is simply melee combat. Now about what was replaced by my quirk, there are 9 creatures called tailed beasts, they are massive concentrations of chakra. The Elemental Nations use them as weapons by sealing them into people, those people are known as Jinchuriki, or power of human sacrifice. Kaminari says. You were a Jinchuriki, weren't you? Momo says. The day I was born my village was attacked by the strongest tailed beast, the 9-tailed demon fox. The leader of our village at the time, the 4th Hokage, gave his life to seal the 9 tails in me. As much as I looked up to him when I was young, I can't help but hate his guts for that. Is there anything else you'd like to know? Kaminari asks. What was your life like? Hagakure asks. I was born as Naruto Uzumaki, and I was an orphan. From the day the 9 tails was sealed in me to the day I left, I was hated by 98% of the village for something I had no control or choice in. In the orphanage I was given the bare minimum to survive, at the age of 4 I was thrown out to fend for myself. At least once a week, I would get chased by a mob that beat me into unconsciousness. He says, as all of them gasp, even Bakugo is disgusted. On my birthdays I'd be hunted down like an animal and get beaten so bad I'd be in the hospital for weeks at a time, with a bare minimum of care. Kaminari says. It couldn't have been tea that bad. Achako says on the verge of tears, just like the other girls, Will Momo's actually crying and all of the guys are pissed. Truthfully, that explanation was putting everything nicely. Kaminari says, making everyone, even Bakugo's eyes widen. Can I go to bed? I'm a little tired and dredging up my past isn't a good experience. Kaminari says. Kaminari, can I ask something? Asks a really short guy with black eyes and purple balls on his head in the style of a mohawk. What, Mineta? Kaminari asks with a hint of hostility. What caused that giant scar on your torso? Mineta asks and several others wonder the same thing. The scar was caused by part of the reason I left the elemental nations. Kaminari says and sees them waiting. Before I turned 13 the village's golden boy Sasuke Uchiha betrayed us to join our most dangerous missing ninja because of an offer of power. Kaminari says. What was the power for? Iida asks. When Sasuke was 8 his older brother Itachi Uchiha slaughtered their entire clan. Sasuke's greatest ambition is to avenge his clan and kill his older brother. Anyway 1 Chunin and 4 Genin were sent out to bring him back. I was a part of that team, by the end it was me versus Sasuke. In the course of our battle he used an assassination technique called the Chidori in an attempt to kill me, but I moved his hand in time and he only got my left lung. Which without the 9 tails would still have been fatal. That scar is from the Chidori. Kaminari says. Now I'm going to bed. He says heading towards the elevator but stops right in front of it. Midoriya, Asui, I'd like to talk to the two of you tomorrow. He says entering the elevator. Next day. We find Kaminari, Kyoka, Izuku and Tsuyu standing in the destroyed clearing. What happened here? Izuku asks. This was from me, letting out all my frustrations yesterday. Kaminari says. What did you want to talk about, Kaminari? Asui asks. Well, I've always had an extreme sense of smell, you see. So I'm going to be blunt, why are the two of you hiding? Kaminari asks, surprising the two of them. What are you talking about? Kaminari, Izuku asks, like Kaminari, Kyoka takes notice of how much the two of them are blushing. Cut the bullshit, Midoriya, it's easy to see that there's something more going on between you and Tsuyu. Even if Kaminari is the one who pointed it out to me. She says. Kaminari, what makes you think there's something more between me and Midoriya, Ribbit? Tsuyu asks, catching her slip up. Well, the reason I mentioned having an extreme sense of smell is because I smell each of your scents on each other, which is normal for sparring. But you two are practically saturated in each other's scent. Also everyone has noticed this, so I'm surprised that no one said anything yet, but Midoriya, you're just much happier around Asui than anyone else, even All Might. Kaminari says, and both of them know they're busted. Izu, we might as well tell them. Asui says. Why yeah, you know Kaminari, even knowing that everything about you we knew is fake. It's still weird seeing you acting completely different. Izuku says. Okay, not everything I showed was fake, I put some bits of my real personality in the fake one. If you're talking about me figuring out your relationship, that doesn't come from intelligence, but my sense of smell. Well, I may be smarter than my fake self, it's not like I break the top 10 or anything. Kaminari says, getting up and the others follow. Wait, Kaminari, this just hit me, but do you think those people from your past got quirks? Izuku asks. No wait, I don't know, it's possible, maybe. Kaminari says, as they leave the forest. Next day. When Monday rolls around, the class is in for quite a surprise. Why? Because currently class 1 and 1B are being forced to do a class together. What is this class, you ask? All 40 of them need to make it through a citywide obstacle course, but one of them is a traitor, and to truly complete this class, they not only have to finish the course, but must also figure out who the traitor is. Currently 7 class 1 members have gone missing, while only 3 class 1B members have gone missing. They're all currently resting at an intersection, catching their breath and trying to figure out who the traitor is. For fuck's sake, it's obvious the traitor is one of you 1B extras, after all we've lost 7 members, and you've only lost 3. Bakugo yells. Calm down, Bakugo, there has to be some kind of pattern. Hajiro says, with his hand up to his chin. You're right. Says a chubby guy who has short ice blue hair and black eyes that have a look of realization in them. What do you mean, Shota? Tetsu asks. Well, from our class Atuska, Juzo and Satsuna are missing. Shota says. They're the 3 smartest in our class. But that doesn't hold true for them, no offense, but Kaminari was the first one of yours taken. Says a girl with honey brown hair and a mushroom-style bob. Actually, Komori, it does hold, think to when Kendo and Kaminari disappeared, what did he do just before he disappeared? Asks a guy with a bird head. Though Koyami's right, just before Itsuka and Kaminari disappeared, he pushed Bakugo to the side. Replace Kaminari with Bakugo and Shota's theory holds solid. Cause then it's Momo, Iida, Bakugo, Izuku, Todoroki, Asui and Kyoka. Which are the 7 smartest in our class. Ejiro says, while nobody notices Kaminari sitting on top of a building watching them. Might as well. Kaminari thinks, as in a silent puff of smoke appears a small harp, he channels chakra into his hands and starts strumming. Evil illusion. Death mirage jutsu. He whispers. What the fuck? Bakugo yells, looks up to see where the sound is coming from when he hears something clatter to the ground. He brings his head back down to see everyone, but Ichako is gone and her helmet is on the ground. Hey Pink Cheeks, what happened to the others and where'd that music come from? He asks. Hey Kitsuki, help me please. She pleads, turning around to face him, and his heart drops. Whoa, what the hell happened? He yells seeing her appearance, one of her eyes is missing, a chunk of her stomach was seemingly ripped out, and the other side of her face is burned off down to the bone as she lumbers over to him before falling at his feet. Uraraka. He screams, then everything's back to normal, aside from there only being 4 of them left, himself, Kirishima, Tetsutetsu, and a guy with blonde hair and blue eyes. Yo Bakugo, you alright, you're crying. Kirishima says. The fucking course I'm alright, why wouldn't I be? Bakugo yells, before they hear laughing on down the road, they all look and see Kaminari. You know, Bakugo, I really wasn't expecting that. Kaminari says. Sparky, what the hell was that? Bakugo roars. That was one of the most basic Jinjutsu, Bakugo, evil illusion. Death mirage jutsu. Kaminari says. What the hell man, would you make me see Mina dying? Kirishima yells. Oh, but that's the beauty of that jutsu, I didn't pick what you saw, you did. It makes you see the person you care most about die in front of your eyes, or your worst fear. And to be truthful, I didn't know if it would even work, I was just seeing if I could use Jinjutsu, using an instrument as a medium. So you 3, I expected something along the lines of what I saw, but you Bakugo truly surprised me. Kaminari says, when Tetsutetsu runs at him and his whole body is made of steel, delivering a haymaker full of fury and throwing Kaminari back. HMPH, nice, a lot of strength behind that punch. Certainly not the worst thing I've ever felt though. He says getting up as electricity arcs around him and he lashes out with a kick faster than anyone can react, launching Tetsutetsu through a store and is then caught by a clone. Kaminari, how much have you been holding back on us? Kirishima asks. Pretty much everything I'm capable of. Kaminari says as electricity starts emitting off his body. Lightning style armor. He says and appears with his elbow planted in Kirishima's stomach. Elbow bolt. He yells, sending Kirishima flying, he is then caught by another clone. Kaminari then points at the guy with blue eyes as 3 metal poles land around him in a triangle formation, he then goes through 3 hand seals. Lightning style. Thunder binding. He says as 3 walls and a ceiling appear between the poles. Monoma, don't try to get out. Kaminari says. I don't know what type of trick this is, but it won't work. Monoma says and similarly to Tetsutetsu his body turns to steel. Monoma don't. Kaminari screams, but Monoma attacks the wall anyway, on impact with the wall, Monoma's entire body convulses. Release. Kaminari says, the walls disappear and Monoma falls out completely unconscious as a clone appears, grabs him and disappears. So Sparky, saving the best for last. Bakugo says arrogantly. Not really, I saved you for last because you're pathetic. Kaminari says with a smirk. Everyone but the teachers is gaping at Kaminari. Are you looking down on me? Bakugo grinds out as tiny explosions start popping on his hands. Bakugo, how can I look down on you when I never thought of you as a threat in the first place? Kaminari says. You're fucking dead. Bakugo roars, blasting off right at Kaminari, who moves to the side just before Bakugo would hit him and bashes him in the face, throwing him through several stores. Kaminari spreads his legs and puts his hand near the ground and electricity gathers in his palm before arsing out and forming a ring around him. Kaminari then pulls his hand back. Lightning style. Beast tracking fang. Kaminari yells, throwing his hand towards Bakugo as a wolf made of electricity rushes after Bakugo. Bakugo points his hand at the wolf and emits a rather large explosion. When the smoke clears, everyone sees that the wolf is still rushing at him and not bothered by the explosion at all. Bakugo, use your brain for once, since you're somehow the 3rd smartest in the class, a concussive blast isn't going to do shit to pure energy like electricity. Kaminari says, and the wolf seemingly disappears from Bakugo's vision, only for his left shoulder to flare in pain and a small amount of electricity flow through his body, and the wolf disappears and his left arm falls limp. Fuck. Bakugo screams and loses all reason and rushes at Kaminari. Just as he gets within striking distance, Kaminari throws his arm out. Chidori stream. He yells as electricity bursts off him and Bakugo falls down. Why can't I move? Bakugo asks. You can't move because when hit by the Chidori stream, the body mistakes the electric current as nerve signals and locks up, just so you know Bakugo, you just lost. Kaminari says, grabbing Bakugo, and in a burst of electricity, teleports the two of them into the observation room, only to see Class 1B stare at him in astonishment. This class was for all of you, not me. I'll take Bakugo to recovery girl, he says, going to leave when someone taps him on the shoulder. He looks to see a girl with vines for hair and green eyes. Yes, Shiozaki. He says. How did I beat you during the sports festival? Shiozaki asks. I especially hate the type of attention the sports festival brings and would have skipped the thing if it wasn't required. I had planned to lose in the cavalry battle, but Shoto drafted me into his team and I ended up making it to the third event. You won because I could care less about the festival, and your class should have had more members in the third event than it did anyway. Kaminari says, dragging Bakugo to the nurse's office. Elemental Nations. We see Jiraiya, Kakashi, Sasuke and Sakura standing outside the hidden leaf. Okay, you two go rest, Kakashi, and I will give Tsunade the report. Jiraiya says, and Sakura and Sasuke head off to their respective hangouts and groups. How do you think Lady Tsunade is going to react? Kakashi asks. No clue, we're about to throw too much at her. We found Naruto, but we can't bring him back or he'll die. He's no longer a Jinchuriki. And there's an entire world outside the elemental nations with people who could possibly rival the 5 Cage. Jiraiya says, and after several minutes they're both in an office with two women. The one sitting behind a desk has straight blonde hair and brown, and the other is standing beside the desk. She has straight, neck-length, jet black hair and onyx eyes. Tsunade, Shizune, you two aren't going to believe what we have to tell you. He says. It better be good, you've been gone for almost 2 months. Tsunade says. Well, for one, we found Naruto. Jiraiya says. Then where is he, Ichiraku's? Shizune asks, and Jiraiya sighs and starts explaining everything that happened, which earns him a bop on the head for using one of Naruto's friends to get his attention. Akimichi Grill. Let me get this straight, Sakura, there's an entire world outside the elemental nations, which is surrounded by some sort of barrier that keeps them from knowing we're here. Naruto can't come back or the Deadman Switch Seal will kill him. He's no longer a Jinchuriki. And of all the places that you find him, he's going to school. Says a girl with long platinum blonde hair and light blue almost green eyes. As unbelievable as it sounds, it's true. Sakura says. The same hyper-ass knucklehead Naruto from 3 years ago? Asks a girl who has brown hair up in buns and brown eyes. Not really, Tenten, with how he talked, to me at least, he seems to have calmed down a whole lot. Sakura says. Hey guys, sorry I'm late. Says a girl with long dark blue hair and wide eyes with a lavender tint. It's alright, Hinata, but you won't believe this, we found Naruto. Sakura says. Oh really? Hinata says. But, Sakura says. Is something wrong, Sakura? Ino asks. Sigh, Hinata, don't get your hopes up, before we left Naruto asked me to tell you something. Sakura says. What is that? Hinata asks, and she gets a bad feeling when Sakura takes a deep breath. Naruto wants you to know he's sorry that it took him so long to realize your feelings, but there's someone else he loves. Sakura says with a sigh at the end. With Kaminari Naruto. We find a bunch of Class 1 and 1B walking into a karaoke bar. Nice to see you, Kaminari. Says an old man behind the bar. Yeah, it's been a while, hasn't it, old man? Kaminari says, heading into the back room. Kaminari, what Arita goes to say. It's alright, before he started UA he worked here part-time, he still comes here to play music, that room also leads to the stage. The old man says, and they see 7 Kaminaris walk onto the stage, 4 with guitars, the other 3 go to drum sets. Looks like a lot the regulars are here and a bunch of new faces. The Kaminari up front screams into the mic and they all start playing, and to the surprise of the students, people start dancing. Thanks.